Good afternoon, folks who just joined. We're just going to give it another minute or so before we jump in with the presentation.
Hey, Patricia.
I think we have a pretty critical mass if we want to get started.
Okay, well, welcome everyone. My name is Mark Wheeler. I'm the Chief Information Officer for the City of Philadelphia. I'm joined here today by Mike Carroll, who's the Deputy Managing Director for our Office of Infrastructure, Transportation, and Sustainability, and Juliet Fink Yates, our Program Manager for our Digital Equity Office. And she is primarily responsible for running our RFI that you're here for the information session here today. So we thank you for joining. We hope to answer your questions. And we have a slide deck that we're going to go through to kind of set the stage, maybe address some of the initial questions you might have, and give you a better indication of what we're looking for in the RFI response. I'll turn it, in terms of asking questions, you can use the chat. We ask that you stay on mute until we can open it up for to take questions from the group, and use the raise your hand option to do that. And we'll try to get through those as best we can. I'll turn it over to Juliet to start us off.
Welcome, everyone. We're delighted that you are here and interested in this request for information. Mark, if you can go to the next slide. We thought we'd start this off to talk a little bit about how we got here. And it really came out of work we did to develop our digital equity plan for the City of Philadelphia. That work was done over the past really almost 2 years, where we met with those in industry, community partners, city officials across different departments, residents, to talk about what was needed in Philadelphia, what were some solutions that we wanted to work on, and how we could achieve digital equity for the City of Philadelphia. In that, we really focused on 4 areas: access to devices, access to reliable and affordable internet, access to digital skills and training, and then this ecosystem. But really why we're here today is out of that digital equity plan came bubbling up this idea around how we can better use city assets to create a more equitable city. And there are 2 initiatives that really address that in our digital equity plan, which is, one is that the city really identified that there could be a pilot use of its assets to facilitate community-led wireless networks, that we could enable new fixed wireless networks using municipal buildings, transportation infrastructure, street furniture, and other assets. And we wanted to dive into that particular initiative over these next few years. And the second one was that the city needed to create a revenue generating stream to support its portfolio of digital equity programs. That we thought about really working toward an investment strategy using our city assets or other revenue generating methods to ensure funds are available for digital equity initiatives beyond this moment in time. And so that would really allow us the flexibility to support programs that may not be covered by other funding sources. So that's really the impetus behind this RFI. The vision that we all shared in the city was really to create a competitive city where everyone has reliable internet, a working device with which to connect to the internet, and the skills necessary to participate fully in the economy and our democracy. And if you go to the next slide, we really also saw this as a moment where we could marry our desire to become a smart city as well, so that we are also a city that's applying innovation, data, and technology to achieve the economic, social, and sustainability goals of the community. And so this RFI really attempts to address both goals. The last bit of information that I'll leave you in terms of the background context to this RFI says they're not. Are you, Steve, you're saying you can't see the slides. Are other folks unable to see the slides as well? Put it in the chat.
And we can, you're going to put the deck in the chat for folks, Julia? I can do that.
We will share, we can share that, we'll post the slides afterwards and share them as well. I just want to make sure folks can actually see them. Okay, it looks like folks can. But Steve, to your question, sorry, we will share these out and make them available.
For just to quickly interject, sometimes with Teams, if you can't see the deck or the deck doesn't appear to be progressing for you, but it is for others, just drop out and come back in, and that tends to correct it.
Great. So just a little bit more context. These are some of the data points that came out of our recent Philadelphia Household Internet Assessment, where we had a consulting company provide a phone survey to about 2,500 residents. In that, what we learned was that about 16% of Philadelphia households still lacked high-speed internet. This is as of July 2021, so just about a year ago when the survey was done. 56% said the cost of the monthly fee was the problem, and 50% said they could not afford the cost of a computer. So both of those things continue to be a challenge. In addition, 29% of these numbers sort of increase as you start digging into the data. So 29% of low-income Philadelphians lacked internet. 33% of our seniors lacked internet, and 1/3 of residents in Philadelphia have difficulty keeping their internet service without a discount plan. When we talk about 16%, we're still talking about nearly 100,000 households in the city of Philadelphia, which is a pretty large number when you consider the scope of the problem. But aside from those who don't have internet, or when I say don't have internet, I should say broadband to the home internet. So they might have a mobile phone, but they don't actually have a high-speed connection to their home. 32% of Philadelphia households are considered subscription vulnerable. This means that these are residents who are either low-income households that experienced service disruption during the pandemic. They say it would be difficult to keep service without a discount, or have experienced, like I said, that service disruption. So these are families that may have had it in the past, but they can't maintain it. And then what we found was that only 31% of all the residents that we surveyed had heard of discount programs for internet and devices. And that more than 90% of those with broadband subscriptions in Philadelphia say a monthly fee of over $20 per month really is too expensive for them. So that's some context for you all around the scope of the Philadelphia situation. In this map, you can see the areas where there is the least access in Philadelphia, North Philadelphia being among the highest number of residents that lack connectivity to the home. Followed by parts of West Philadelphia, parts of sort of the lower Northeast, and some parts of South Philadelphia as well. And I will turn it back to Mark now to kind of dig into the RFI itself.
So we're very excited about this RFI and the potential results that we can get out of it and move forward. So what we're looking at doing is solving this basic challenge, is that we're in need of a reliable long-term revenue stream to sustain our digital equity work. The work that Juliet has commented on in the past 2 years since the start of the pandemic or the start of the school year in August 2020 has been focused on the K through 12 population and funded with short-term philanthropic dollars. And then also, as the federal government has released money to connect families to the internet, we've made use of that as well. We also have assets throughout the city. We have many fixed assets in our physical plant that may be of value and could be leveraged to both energize a local economy around digital service delivery, as well as provide some form of revenue stream for us to fund our digital equity programs, which don't just cover connectivity, but also our digital skills building and digital literacy. We have first in the nation digital navigators program that was in the works before the pandemic. And then we have initiatives around devices and connecting families to the devices that they need to enable their work. So this is a call to action that we would like to see solutions proposed that could either make in-kind use of our assets to provide low-cost or free digital services to the residents and or businesses of Philadelphia, but we're mostly focused on our residential population. But again, we'd like to see a very holistic approach, or other proposals that seek to use technology in ways that we could then fund our digital equity initiatives. And we would very much like this to be innovative in the use of public-private partnerships, and we have a very good track record as a city in engaging those partnerships. These are the types of ideas that we're interested in innovating around. You're not limited to any of these in the proposal, but to give you a sense of the things that we're already have been investigating through our Smart Cities program work that Mike Carroll's many different teams have been a part of through the years, and what is already underway in terms of a lighting controls LED program with our street lights. So this is very common across most cities. We see a lot of benefits to investing in transportation analytics and intelligent infrastructure. Be aware that we do have digital advertising already. We have a contract with Intersection. They set up kiosks around our Center City area that does advertising, and there could be more opportunities for that as well. As I mentioned, we are interested in ideas that use our city-owned facilities. We provided through the RFI a web map viewer that has what we call our master facilities database there, which we've tried our best to identify in ways that you can all understand in terms of the number of multi-use buildings that we have, buildings dedicated as either libraries, health and human services like our health clinics, our public safety buildings that may include fire, police, or licenses and inspection services, and then all of our parks and rec structures themselves that could be utilized as an asset, as well as open parking lots and some transit stations that are owned by the city that are used by the SEPTA or our Southeast PA Regional Transit. There are assets that are in the public domain that are not owned by the city and are not included in this RFI, and we would ask you to be considerate of that. You may give some thought to how these could be utilized, but you need to be aware that they're really not included in this RFI. In particular, that includes the school district buildings or charter school buildings, any of the public housing, and our electric, any of the Philadelphia Gas Works facilities specifically. Things that we'd like you to consider in your response. If you get into details about how you're going to use an asset, please give us an indication of whether those assets need to be accessed by third parties. What type of supporting equipment or services would you need to provide a level of service if you were to utilize that building? Are you going to rely on it for electricity? Do you need space for servers and racks? What type of staff will need access and how often? We'd like you to explain how your revenue or cost sharing models work in detail and provide examples that you have in places with other cities and or counties around the country, and making their references available to us. If you intend to braid different funding sources together, explain those and how that braiding is going to work in terms of overlap and timelines. And if you're specifically interested in being the technology integrator or the project or a program manager for anything that you envision happening in the RFI, tell us how you would fulfill that role, what experience you have in doing these types of integrations, working with intelligent infrastructure entities, working with broadband entities, bringing that all together into a cohesive set of solutions that you can then manage and even be the service provider for us afterwards. In none of these scenarios should you assume that we want to own the solution set. We may want to be looking at a managed service set of provisions going forward in the future.
Okay, thank you, Mark.
So
I just want to kind of frame some of the commitments we're making in terms of getting involved in this process. And, first I would just want to say we're open to all the ideas that are out there. Certainly we're interested in ideas that have a very direct nexus to the digital equity goals that were laid forth in this presentation and certainly in our strategy overall. But, we're looking for ways to really leverage these assets in ways that even indirectly we can support those goals. So if you've got a good idea that doesn't seem like it's a great fit necessarily, don't assume that. Just go ahead and share that with us, and we'll be interested to think that through, and they'll give us something to work with moving forward for sure. We're going to be involved in this process all the way through. We're going to make sure that we're coordinating the details across multiple departments, multiple facility owners and managers. So we're capable of doing that. We're committed to do that. If you think that you guys can do that, we are interested in understanding what that would look like. But in terms of all the coordination and facilitation, we're not going to walk away, out of necessity. I mean, that would be something that we'd be interested in folks who feel like they provide specific value to the city, incorporating that information in their responses. But we're capable of doing it. So if you can't provide that higher level of coordination, facilitation, don't be shy. Just talk about the things that you can do that help us leverage these assets. And that's going to be very useful for us to learn about as well. Transparency is very important to what we do. It's going to be important not just in dealing with this RFI immediately in front of us. A lot of the information we'll hold on to and make sure anything that's proprietary is handled appropriately. But in general, there's going to be a lot of interest across the city in this whole process. And, specifically when we get into the work itself, we want to make sure you're getting everything you need, that you are able to ask questions and you get direct responses from us. And, it doesn't seem like there's any hidden agendas that are fouling things up as we're trying to move forward in this process. I'll mention that, we are open to different kinds of arrangements here, whether it's one RFP, multiple RFPs, or master license agreements. We've had good experience with master license agreements. And when you look at the spectrum of opportunities between, let's say, exclusive RFPs and master license agreements, the work that we can do is sometimes helpful in terms of that coordination, that kind of herding of cats, that creating of a competitive environment where everybody has a chance to actually show what they can do and has an opportunity to do that at a specific site. And that tends to push us towards a master license agreement more so, because we're going to take on some of that work of doing the cat herding, of calling balls and strikes, making sure that everybody has a fair playing ground. We understand that is a technical lift, and we've managed to do that in a couple of different areas, and we can develop the tools to do that. And frankly, in many ways, our overhead is going to be a little bit lower than sometimes it is in the private sector. However, we also want to acknowledge that the private sector often adds tremendous value when they do take on that role, and they end up taking on more of the coordination. So we're certainly interested in what people have to say, and we don't want to preclude any ideas that people have anywhere along that spectrum. So this, again, is about our digital equity plan. And ultimately, it is on us to figure out how to work out ideas which leverage these facilities in ways that, really are more about a revenue stream and not really directly or in any in-kind way supporting the digital equity work. And all I'll say is that if you have ideas about a nexus there, even things that no one would think about, that is something that's going to catch our attention. Again, it's not to the exclusion of ideas which are purely about the facility itself and a business opportunity that arises from that. But those connections are always going to be interesting to us. So you might want to take some time to think about how to expand on those in the responses that you provide. And similarly, we've done a fair amount of thinking about where and how state and federal funding opportunities, and I'll expand on that, philanthropic, other types of funding and grant opportunities could support this work. But if you have ideas, don't make assumptions about what we know. Share that information with us as well, and especially any qualifications that you bring to delivering those opportunities and being successful in the implementation that those opportunities frame for us. So I'll leave it at that and hand it back to Julie and Mark.
So I think we'd like to open it up to questions for you all, and there's a few in the chat, Mark, which you might not be able to see, and Mike. So I'll read them out, and then these are ones that one of the two of you hopefully can tackle. So the first question was about the survey when it was conducted. I did post that in the chat. We conducted that survey in June, July of 2021, and there's more information in the chat that leads you directly to that outcome. Is it possible to add assets like city-owned lights, kiosks, etc. to the map?
Yes, we can add a lot of that information. I want to be careful that it's not clear in my head that we can be exhaustive with that information. What I want to make folks aware of is that as far as the kiosks are concerned, we do have a concession, as Mark pointed out, which has some exclusivity to it for kiosks in the right-of-way, in the public right-of-way. So that doesn't preclude us from exploring opportunities to leverage those kiosks themselves, but that's going to include an additional party being part of implementing any ideas that come from that. And then somewhat similarly, the streetlights themselves exist in a couple different ways. So we have city-owned poles, which have our lights on them, and I'll throw in traffic lights and other similar facilities. And then we have utility poles, which are mostly PECO, our electric utility in the region. And so we do have a portal that's set up to kind of map all that stuff out. There's, like I said, a master license agreement that we have had in place that is focused on those poles, all of those poles. And so there's a program that's already set up to with a license, that we use to address communications equipment that's on those poles. And if you have an idea that's different than that, we'll certainly be interested to explore it. But if your idea is more about, specifically 5G, 4G type deployments, then we already do have a setup in order to manage that, so we could steer you in that direction.
I think the next.
Go ahead.
Sorry, the next question is on smart city IoT applications. So there's been a variety of IoT applications used across the city over a number of years. We have in environmental health, we have environmental monitors that are IoT devices. Our Green Cities Clean Waters program that is all about making investments in green stormwater infrastructure, uses a number of remote sensors that they move around, and that's done by the Philadelphia Water Department. Specifically, we have a pilot project, and I put the link into the chat for what we call Smart Block PHL, which is a joint effort between the Office of Innovation and Technology and the Streets Department and Mike Carroll's Office for Infrastructure and Transportation. It's funded through the US Ignite group with Comcast and Jugano being partners. It is smart street lamps with LiDAR sensors and machine learning AI training that's going on, and we're figuring out how to replace the mechanical mechanisms and the manual mechanisms that are used to do pedestrian, bike, car counts on the street, and as well as it has environmental sensors operating. And that's phase one, and then phase two would include more AI training utilization and testing out some more pilots there. So that's on a 2-block stretch in Center City. And then there will be a curbside management pilot that's kicking off. But I don't think at this point we're installing any sensors around that, but that may be something that has to be put into place.
So I want to take note of Kevin Comstock's question, and I did see there's a part of that question that maybe wasn't addressed in the previous response. We allow for co-location on our poles for different things. So I was speaking specifically to small cell. I will have to do some research to find out whether the specific examples that you're raising with respect to CATV and power have been ever incorporated into any agreements that the city has put forward. I'll not be able to exhaustively speak to what PICO has done, but we can inquire for them as well. Now, we're not including PICO facilities, PICO assets explicitly in this. As Mark pointed out, we're focused on city assets. And, maybe to get to Patrick Livingston's question, if we're talking about non-pole assets, so buildings, those types of things, we, to my knowledge, have not done at any real scale small cell sites associated with that. We have done tower projects in the distant past, but not small cell sites. So this would be an opportunity for us to explore that with respect to different types of buildings, for sure, and other assets that are included in the map could be considered, to the exclusion of the poles.
And I believe the map are the buildings in the map itself do have elevation information on it. So if you're interested in height information, it should be there. If it's not, please, pose that question back through the RFI channels on how to respond, because we have other online mapping tools in the city that would give you that information. I'll throw in a couple here in the chat. They have their own measurement tools in them. So if you need to do a verification of distances between buildings, you want to try to do some type of line of sight, we have all of that data on open data available to you to do that analysis. However, for a very quick tool set, we make that available to the public for free, and I'll put those links in.
So Kevin Comstock is asking, do we have telecommunications connectivity with existing facilities? So I'll just speak about the traffic signals and maybe pass it back to you, Mark, to talk about more general connectivity. We do have a integrated traffic signal network in place, which feeds into the Traffic Management Center, which the city stood up in 2015. We're still in the process of connecting a significant number, probably the majority, by a slim amount of our signals to the traffic management system. Many of our traffic signals, if we're going to stick with that, are fairly far out of date. I mean, this is 1970s technology that still exists on the street in some places, and we're looking at different options in terms of maintaining that connectivity, or creating and maintaining that connectivity. So that would span from fiber optic to wireless, and other opportunities that folks are aware will be interested to learn about. Mark, I'm not sure if you want to comment about the city's other networks, building-based networks.
We do have we have our own municipal fiber that connects to buildings. We also have leasing agreements with Comcast to connect our municipal fiber with some of their commercial fiber through protected VPN systems to create what we call an institutional network that has reach to multiple city buildings, but not all. And I don't have a map available of all of those interconnections, but that it is, you should all be asking that question: is this on your INET? Is it on your municipal, or is it not on your municipal network? And we can verify those locations.
Why don't we switch to a live question from Paul?
Yes, good afternoon. Can you hear me okay, Michael?
Yes.
Okay, great. Yeah, quick question. I mean, obviously, large initiatives like this will require, I would say, a pretty significant support ecosystem as well, or say, call it a customer support structure. Does there exist today in the city a support structure that would have the opportunity to support something like this, or is the city open to hearing some creative ideas that may work, let's say, in conjunction with providers of the underlying network that would ultimately deliver against the intent? Just wanted to get a sense for that, if I could.
Mark, you want to take this on first?
Yeah, so sustaining new initiatives, equipment, and programs is challenging. We would have to understand what the city's role and whether it's valuable for us to do that work. I think that we're open to, as Mike said, and we've been saying throughout, we're open to all ideas. Certainly manage any type of managed services that can be done. We want to understand that and have that be part of the proposal.
Okay.
Can I jump in too and add that I think if there's folks who have that experience in other municipalities in particular of managed services, we're interested to know what work has been done in other cities that you may have done. So that could be something that is put into an RFI as well, to the RFI.
And
again, you can propose if it's not your solution set and your staff and your ability to manage that. But if you're an integrator and you have relationships and want to build relationships out to get that work done, also include that in the proposal and discuss how you would do it and your experience and success serving as that integrator in the program manager role. Mike?
Yeah, I appreciate that, and I want to kind of maybe segue into the question that Catherine Lee put into the chat. And, I think it's a similar answer. Well, of course, we'll be interested to learn about the types of professional service support that's out there, whether it's RFP development, grant writing, and so forth. It will be important, though, to understand how the qualifications kind of specify, give some details, some meat on the bones in terms of what the revenue experience, the revenue generation experience, and or the service delivery experience is, because that's going to really make that stand out. And ultimately, those are the things we're looking for to get out of this whole thing. So if we can connect that professional support to those outcomes, that'll make us pay better attention and have us a clearer sense of what's the benefits.
There's a question from Patrick.
Yes.
Yeah.
So risk management, I believe, was involved in some of the conversations which took place about 5 years ago. We'll certainly keep them up to speed as we get into this. We are relying mostly, Patrick, on the facility managers and the departments at this point in time, but we can expand that conversation as we get some responses back. And as with any license agreement, that detail about what happens, the termination, that is something that's real, and certainly we will want to talk that through and think that through before we get that. But I think that's a later chapter in this whole conversation. I think the model for what we've had in the poll conversation is a pretty good one, because sometimes polls disappear too. And so there's some, requirements that are placed on both the city side and the licensee side in terms of the lead time that goes into, the format for giving people information well ahead of time so they can plan accordingly. So Stephen Strickland is raising an issue. Oh, okay, you just want the presentation. I think that's an easy one.
Juliet, that would be put in the portal where the rest of the RFI documents are. So after this session, we do summarize the questions that are submitted that come to us by email, and that also appears in the portal. So the presentation would be there as well.
Which is a reminder that now is a great time to ask any of those pressing questions. Questions or requests for clarification or additional information are due by 9/9 at 5 p.m. And then we will respond to them by 9/16 and get them posted into that portal for you. And then final RFI responses are due on 9/30.
Yep, we can work on sharing the recording as well.
Any other live questions folks want to vocalize?
Have folks, I also just want to make sure that folks that they've managed to be able to access the mapping application we provided. And so if they have any trouble with that, please don't hesitate to reach out to us too. It looks like folks might not have additional questions at this moment in time. So thank you for joining us today. We look forward to hearing your ideas. We're really hopeful and excited that we get some really thoughtful and great responses from the community. And we look forward to seeing what you all can bring to the table.
Appreciate everybody's time this afternoon.
Yes, thank you
Great.
all for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you.